Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's not on, but it looks nice. Welcome. For this year's Berea Writers Circle Book Fest, we decided to do something different. And that was, instead of having individual authors do readings, that we would do panels on very specific themes. And this theme for our opener is finding time to write. Something I'm sure we all struggle with. And so if we could just please go down and give some introductions, who you are, what you've done, what books are you selling, and then from there I'll ask some questions, then we'll open up to general questions.
I'm Tina Parker. I live here in Berea. It's good to see so many familiar faces. Thank you all for being here. I'm the author of 2 poetry collections, Mother May I and Another Offering. I'm representing Kentucky State Poetry Society as the immediate past president of that. So that's me, and I'm looking forward to talking with these folks and all of you all.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Brandon Thompson. Super duper happy to be here. This is my home away from home because my day job is that I work here at the Public Library. So I'm the author of 4 collections and a collaboration, all of which are for sale here today. My first big boy book under a publishing house is called From the Back of a Thirsty Camel, and this is a little self-published chapbook called, this is my newest, called Fire in the Moon. I'd like to share a poem out of this book today here in this setting. I think it's relevant to finding time to write at some point. My biggest honor of 2019, I think, was being asked to present in this October at the Kentucky State Poetry Society's conference. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'll be typing on the typewriter in there, so please come get a poem. They are absolutely free and from my heart to you. So here in a little bit, you'll hear me clackety-clacking.
Cool. I'm Verlaine McDonald. I teach at the college. I write nonfiction, and my first book was based on my dissertation, and it basically was an examination of the American Communist Farm Movement. My second book was with Arcadia Publishing, the company that does the historic photo books, and I co-edited that with my mom. And my book that came out last year is from UK Press, and it's basically a biography of Paul Rush, who is the missionary, professor, entrepreneur who started a nonprofit organization in Japan that is essentially related to the annual delegation exchange between Kyoto, Japan, and Madison County. So, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
all. For the questions, what's going to happen is, it doesn't have to go in any particular order. I know we just went down this way, but don't feel like it to always be the first one to answer. One thing I'm sure we're all wondering about is your writing process, especially when it comes to scheduling. Can you please share that with us?
Well, just so that my colleagues don't feel they have to go first, I can say that my situation is perhaps a little different in that I do have the good fortune of having a sabbatical every few years, which is a huge blessing as a writer, of course. But it's also interestingly tricky because, then it's very easy to feel like, well, I'll just do my writing every 7th year. So, there's a sense that, well, when that time comes, then I can really pour myself into it. And so you asked about sort of our process, and to keep things going in between those sabbaticals, what I try to do is, as a nonfiction writer, dive into the primary sources just at any time I can. For instance, my husband, who's my co-author on this most recent book, and I keep our newspapers.com subscription active, and that's something that I can just dive into even while waiting at the doctor's office and do some primary source reading and note-taking, even like through voice to text on my phone. which helps me feel a little bit less like my writing is dying in those 6 years in between my sabbaticals. So even though I am very much middle-aged, I've been trying to take advantage of technology to keep the writing going. And voice to text is very helpful.
Voice what?
Voice to text, so just talking into my phone and it types it. And I think most of the smartphones now do have that feature. So it's one thing I'd recommend.
Briefly, I would absolutely just piggyback on that and say 100%. That's so I'm in a very different place in life. I have a small child and a full-time job and a part-time job. I'm an adjunct faculty member at a school in California. Our program is a hybrid program, but it's mostly online. I don't have any time. I just don't. I just don't. So yeah, my smartphone, which is in my pocket, I will not whip it out right now. We all know what a smartphone is my best friend, and laying tired in bed when the inspiration hits, or on my lunch break in the middle of a work day, or on a run. I'm a runner. That's something else I could mention. That is the time that I take for myself is to go for a run, about an hour a day. And a large part of those runs are spent walking with my face buried in my phone because that's what I'm doing some of my work. And then of course it's very lots of different programs, and maybe we shouldn't get so in depth right now in this moment, but there are lots of different programs that you can use to very quickly and efficiently just take that text from your device and just shoot it right on over to a Word document or something that you're more appropriate for your editing work. And that's something that I use.
My writing process has a lot to do with eliminating distractions, and we all have to kind of figure out what those are for ourselves, because I actually think of it's more like fighting for time to write than time to write. So I'm constantly thinking, okay, what can I eliminate if it's scrolling through Facebook this day, and I could add listening to podcasts. That's kind of really the only fancy technological thing I do in my writing, because I can listen to poets reading. It makes that cadence come into my ear, and it's all about the rhythm. So I found that that's something I can do when I have little chunks of time, like I'm waiting for the girls to finish up a soccer practice, or I can have a podcast going, again, instead of just scrolling and looking at the weather again on my iPhone. So my process also a lot of times looks like I am not writing. So sometimes it is me doing nothing. I schedule 2 retreats a year through the Kentucky Foundation for Women. I really encourage you all to look into that. It's in Louisville. They have a lovely home farmhouse outside of Louisville. So I make that happen twice a year so that I have these blocks of time to sit and do nothing, because that's what I was saying. Reading and reading and reading is what I do. And I also know that one of my distractions is novels, and a lot of people are like, oh, could you not read novels? If I start reading novels, it's just like eating candy, and it distracts me from my poetry. So I try to make myself just read poetry. But I'll stop there for now.
Wonderful. You actually had a question I'm going to ask later about distractions. When we write, and many of us here do write, we often have a preferred time to write. Whether it's like Hemingway at 5:30 in the morning, or closer to home, the late Larry Brown from Tennessee, who would write, God, to 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, just shrink through the night. Do you have a preferred time to write, and is there a reason? And do you get to do it? Sometimes we don't get to write in our preferred time. Sorry, 3 questions. Do you have a preferred time? Is there a reason? Do you get to do it?
I really had to let that notion go of my preferred time, because then I would just always be disappointed because I'm juggling so many different roles. So I have this notebook with me. It'll have tiny little sentences. Sometimes it has to-do lists. Basically, I'm just very gentle on myself, and yeah.
I've found that a preferred time is, for me, personally, a little bit more malleable than I thought it was, maybe. Because for many years, I had engaged in this very struggle of constant disappointment because I wanted to write after the sunset, out on my back porch. But you can't do that with a 1-year-old. When you have a 1-year-old, you go to bed when they go to bed. You just do.
You're exhausted.
Right, precisely, right, sure. So then very begrudgingly I started the run and other things, but then I found like almost it's like a new habit being formed, yeah. And then I look forward to the run and the inspiration starting to flow and the writing on my smartphone, and so but then this process repeats itself because then I'm like, oh, I can't have my run today. Now I'm grumpy. But then a new habit can be formed. I think it always surprises me how easily, for me personally, that can be malleable. That favorite or preferred writing time. I think it's true.
I actually have a 9-year-old and a 16-year-old, so I definitely resonate with everything you all say. And at one point, I thought we had to sort of give a speech to you all instead. But no, don't worry, I'm not going to do that. It's just that I did voice to text some thoughts, and what Tina said about she said, I try to be very gentle with myself. And that was one of the things I would have shared, which is that as for myself, if I don't write at the time of day that's peak for me, which is like about 8 to noon, it's very easy to, or if you don't get your run, to sort of spiral into beating oneself up, or also just negative thinking. Like I haven't opened my Word document of chapter 3 for 3 weeks, a month, and just to feel like, oh, that's it. I'll never get my momentum back. It's over. I may as well give up. But one thing I tell my students in public speaking, and people have actually researched this, and that's the power of self-talk. You know, there are lots of self-help books about whatever you want to call it, self-talk or intrapersonal communication. And so I try to do what I tell them, which is to try to actively just banish those thoughts, like I'll never get my mojo back on that chapter, and just try to sneak in even just a little. You know how what's her name, Anne Lamott, how she talks about shitty first drafts. You know, I'll try to say even just a shitty paragraph on voice to text. Can be the start of something.
It really can spark.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for me too. Oh, there I am.
Yes.
Feeling, yeah.
Or there's something here I can take.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It's great because that's actually another question later. I have the flow right.
Well, could I say something?
Please.
To me, I had to start seeing it as if, you know, when you start a car on a cold morning, it's like, you know, it's not really all that. But it gets going. And for me, the negative stuff, like, oh, I'll never do this, you know, I'll never work, I just have to be more rigid or more, you know, disciplined. That just seems to be the wall that blocks all that wonderful stuff on the other side of it. So I really am appreciative of what you said, of you just have to let all that go and give your car a little start time, you know, warm up there, you know, and then it'll just start flowing like it always does. I mean, and it, you know, it's slower or faster, depends on the person, I'm sure, but I really think that's how it goes.
Combating the resistance to going out into the cold.
Yes.
To start it at first. I fight that with every fiber of myself. I don't want to go out in the cold, but as soon as I do,
Yeah, you warm up and you're on your way. And
that's it.
Yeah.
I love the metaphors.
Yeah.
And you give yourself a pat on the back for that.
Yeah.
That's a pretty courageous piece of self-discipline.
I'm still cussing the whole time.
That's okay, just nothing wrong with that.
We had talked about distractions earlier, and I was wondering, and Tina, you already touched on this a bit for yourself, but how do you overcome distractions? Like, what would you say is your biggest distraction? How do you find it?
I don't remember who came up with the phrase, the tyranny of the urgent, but it's such a good phrase, and I heard it applied to email. That in the workplace, that if you leave your email open and you keep hearing it ping or whatever, and that there's a sense of being, tyrannized by these urgent, requests from students or the school or, your job or whatever. And so I do sometimes just simply refuse to open my email until some point in the day, and rarely regret it.
It really is that important. They'll either be right there in front of you to tell you what it is, or they'll call you or whatever. Yeah.
That's right.
I often think of what I heard that Napoleon used to do, and look what a conqueror he was, that he would wait 1 month to open any correspondence that came to him, because by the time the month was over, it wasn't important anymore. Anyways, so that's one thing I pat myself on the back for, is that, okay, I don't think I waited a month.
I like it would be a check with a limited time.
With a nice number on it too. Yeah.
Try telling that to the utilities company.
Yeah.
Laughter helps too.
What's coming up for me is distractions or reasons not to write, right? I absolutely do not succeed in this even that often, but when I can incorporate the reasons not to write into my writing, I always find that the writing is for me very transformative and important. And transparently, I've been looking for a segue into sharing this poem, but is now an okay time if I share a poem about finding the time to write? Okay, thank you. Well, so it's called These Lessons. It's fairly brief, just a few pages. It goes like this. You'll see. I crept from your bedroom victorious, for sleep had found you at last, while exhaustion raked its fire through the darkened muscles of my mind. Every part of me cried and ached for my own rest. But then I heard your tiny voice calling me back, informing me that my hard work had not yet finished. And just as I was about to give way to the temptation of anger and the small-minded seduction of indignation, I remembered who we were. I remembered that I have a choice about how I'll be with you. I remembered that you need me to teach you the very lessons that you are helping me to learn today. How unspeakably profound that you came here to learn all I have to share, but first, you'd be my teacher. These lessons that I'm learning today are smoothing all my roughest edges like a river stone, so that perhaps one far-off day, while walking along the bank, you might stoop and put me in your pocket. Which of us is the dough, and which the hands that knead it? I'll ask you this riddle again one day, years from now. In some place and some time, so far separated from your childhood home that we both feel the choke of tears when we speak of it together. And I will remind you that any good lesson I have ever helped you to learn was first whispered into my ear from a baby's crib while we both slept. So my story about that is, I was dying to go downstairs and write. I had work to do, damn it. And that became my work.
That was nice. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I guess one last question, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. One thing many of us struggle with are the lacunas, the long periods of time when we're not writing. And I was
Could you
wondering-
repeat that last sentence? I couldn't hear you.
I am so sorry. Something that we all suffer from, one way or another as writers, is that every now and then we encounter moments of a prolonged period of time of not writing. And so what I would want to know, maybe we would want to know, is what was the longest you went without writing?
Oh, gosh.
And,
Painful.
but, let's look at, let's ease out of it. How did you get back into the groove?
The longest. How did I?
I can't think of, I just think of it so broadly, what my writing looks like, and I try, I mean, this is one of the things I want to say today, is I always tell myself, like, I'm doing the work of writing, so no matter what that is, what I need in that moment, so I might be reading just tons of poems, and not just taking them in as fast as I can. I might be researching primary sources, and I might be submitting to contests, which is a whole different part of my brain, and that is the work of writing, and that is what I'm in right now, and I have to constantly tell myself, I'm not going to count how long I haven't, like, done the magic work. Like, I don't know how poems happen, like, but I'm not gonna count that right now because I'm doing this right now, and that's part of the process. So I don't know the first question, and I already forgot the second question.
What's that relevant?
Okay.
Great.
That's lovely.
I'm struggling with this one. My long periods are often due to life circumstances for me. When I'm, for lack of better ways of saying it, when I'm having a hard time for some reason, if I'm ill, or emotionally, or depressed, which I think these things all happen to us from time to time, or I have a very sick parent, or trouble with my child, or something, you know. I almost find like the life circumstance has to give way a little bit for me sometimes before I can get back into it. But then when I do, that life circumstance feeds the art. Almost every time, I can almost count on that, you know? So there's a little ray of hope for me in that way. Yeah. They say the best comedians are folks with the shittiest lives, right? So, maybe, I hope that's the same about those. We'll find out.
When my husband and I had been married almost 15 years when we finally had the opportunity to adopt. And so that shook our world in a great way, but you know, like you were saying, life circumstances. I mean, I stopped reading novels, and I remember feeling grief over not having time to read novels. Because I don't, like Tina, you said you get sucked into them and you don't work, but even though I don't write fiction, I find that the beauty of fiction sometimes motivates my nonfiction and so forth. Anyway, so to directly answer your question, I don't think I really wrote for probably 3 years or so. And so and I guess that's why I came up with that idea I shared with you, which is not original to me, but just trying to actively banish negative self-talk or beating yourself up, because I did a whole lot of that. You know, I had a finished dissertation, and I had begun the process of revising it for publication, and then our baby came home, and I just walked away. And so I think some of that just had to be forgiving myself for those lost years, and then trying to actively say, just, you know, knock it off, one day at a time. At least go back and read what you had, and you know how it is, and seeing, oh, actually that's not half bad. And and for me, sometimes when I do go back to a project, I allow myself just to copy edit for a while. You know, copy editing can be sort of like a distraction or a device to avoid, you know, doing other kinds of work. But for me, it was a way back into writing. Just tinkering with the words opened a door.
I appreciate that. The same for me.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
We know Stephen King, after his accident, I read his whole account of not being able to write, and because of the pain and the drugs and, you know, just the whole process he went through. And then he talked about getting back into it. and how, you know, he struggled with that because he was very disciplined, 2,000 words or
Yeah.
whatever he said every morning and stuff. And he had to just do a little bit at a time after his accident, you know, after he could sit long enough, because he couldn't sit long enough to do, you know, he damaged his back and broke a lot of bones. So, yeah, it is I'm sure it's a struggle. There is no.
Does anybody have any questions or contributions to the conversation? It's open to the floor.
I wanted to, I'm sorry, I wanted to touch on something that was mentioned earlier. You were talking about the use of technologies in your writing process and how you use your phone and text-to-speech to get this process through. And I know a few writers who are of the younger generation, in their early 20s and such. And I think it's interesting that you're turning to technology because in a lot of the cases for younger writers, I've noticed that they've been actively turning to a pen and a pad of paper.
Yeah. Some of my students, it's so interesting. I have an assignment in one of my classes, and it used to be like a journal, basically, like many of us might journal. But then with the, you know, embracing of technology, over the years, I asked them to put it in Word documents. But just the last couple of times I've offered that class, students have asked, can I use a journal to do this? I said, sure. And they purchased these lovely, artifacts to write in, and it's really cool.
You had a question?
Yes, and I realize now it's actually two. One, when you mentioned that newspaper.com, I don't know what that is, but it sounds like where you open it up and you can put something and then it saves it for you.
Oh, sorry, no. It is a repository of digital newspapers,
Oh,
and they're searchable, and it's amazing. Yeah.
all right. Then the second question is a little more involved. I mean, it may take a little while, but I think it's something that hits every writer at some point in time, and for some of us, is a bugaboo, a ghost. How I found that I can fill my life so darn full that, oh gee, I don't have time to write.
Yeah.
Oh, and then have a reason to beat myself up, which I'm so glad to hear all these ways to say, stop it. How do we get over what I now recognize has been a long-term fear of actually seeing it in print, actually having it published, or getting so close to it, I realize, oh, I think I need to rewrite this.
I think it happens a lot, doesn't it? I mean,
Now that I see that, and I was thinking of that on the way here, that I realize I just open up all kinds of can of worms to distract me. And so I do.
When you say fear, are you afraid of letting it go or of other people seeing it?
I think all of the above.
Yeah. Well, I was actually, because I was going to talk about one of my distractions, I said kind of the physical novel one, a major mental block that I've worked through for 20 years is it's a distraction if I think I can't write that. So-and-so's going to read it, what are they going to think about me? My poems are very autobiographical, and that's the story I need to tell. So a lot of my pushing, sometimes my writing is me writing the same line over and over. I put, my writing is my work, my writing is my work. I have to tell this story, and I'll just literally write those lines over and over. And I'll also tell myself, this is the story I have to tell, and that is going to change me, and it could possibly impact even just one other person. What if that truly changed one person's life? Mostly the people I'm afraid of reading it aren't going to ever even pick it up. So that's what I tell myself too. I'm like, they're not going to look at it, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It's a lot of talk to yourself. Yeah.
What happened a number of years ago when I finally went ahead and started writing, and it was purging, of course, so purging that I had to bring a trash can nearby in case I threw up, It was that tough. And then, because I kept having to run to the bathroom, I'm like, okay, I'm fine, I come back. And so I just wrote a trash can. Anyways, so once I realized it wasn't flu I was coming down with, it is they're writing, you know. And then I put it up for a while, and then I broke out in hives. Well, a few days ago, I broke out in hives again, and I thought, okay, Carol, you're gonna have to just write those books.
My question or comment is along these same lines about authority, which is a wonderful word, author authority, the authority to write and claiming that. And just recently, I was telling somebody some plans and that I hope to spend time writing, fitting with a part-time job and retirement and so on. And I changed that to I plan to. And I'm more free with telling people that I'm doing this program and writing and that I'm working on a novel and that kind of thing, where for years I just didn't feel I had the authority to do that. And so it goes along with what you're saying, and I just wonder if you have anything to say to that, how you overcame that, and you got the courage even to submit things for publication.
Giving self-permission, that's what it is, isn't it?
A great mentor in my life, a writing mentor, gave me a lot of great coaching for a lot of great years. And whenever I'd leave his office at university, I'd say, well, Dr. Morgan, I hope you have a great day. And he'd throw his head back and he'd say, I intend to. And when I was younger, when we first met, I was like, what an asshole. Kind of like, who makes you think you're entitled to, or what, I don't know, it felt, because of my own hang-ups, it felt like, almost like sticky or ego-centered or something, but it was just him giving himself permission to have a great day, you know what I mean? And so then I matured, and I intend to write a lovely poem today, or, whatever, yeah, it's about permission, I think.
And speaking it into existence.
And yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I do to separate, after 20 years of working through all the baggage and layers and what if someone reads it, but also the business of writing. Like I will tell myself, okay, I have a day job and I calendar time, I make to-do lists, I apply that to my writing. So like part of my notebook, this side, I had this page open to show y'all, like this side is lists, what I want to get done, like whether it's submitting to a certain contest or usually it's more nuts and bolts thing, and this side is more free flow. So I also apply goal setting, because I'm like, well, anything I do in a day job, right? I mean, my writing is my work, and that kind of helps me keep it at the front, and it helps me separate some of those personal layers.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you have time, making time to do things is one thing, but is at the end of the day, can you make your mind stop? Or do you stay awake all night teasing these things that you've been working on during the day? Or do you have a strategy for helping those stop?
I think ritual is really important for me personally. Find what works for you. If it's to brew a cup of your favorite tea, and you said make your mind stop, that what a hit for me, and what a struggle it is for all of us until you find something that works for you. And a habit also. So the habit of ritual. Well, that's a good title for a book, isn't it? The powerful habit of ritual or something. I don't know, now I'm like Joel Holstein or something.
Oh, Lord.
Oh yeah, that's
And there
charged
with
these
the
days.
book.
Whoops! That's Tony Robbins, that's also charged. Anyway, finding what worked for me was very helpful to kind of dial that down a little bit.
Well, I think that's important because even with children, you prepare them, like for bedtime, you have a bedtime ritual that begins to prepare them, and their bodies get used to that. And as soon as you start it, even unconsciously, their bodies start winding down. And so I think for writing, we could do the same thing for ourselves. We do it for other things, I think, unconsciously. But if we explored that, we'd see how we've set ourselves up to prepare ourselves for things.
I agree.
And that's actually I try to think about that, like if my day job is keeping me awake, right? How can I turn that upside down and let my writing job be, that would be a welcome thing for me. If my writing job is like keeping me awake and those ideas are still going. And a lot of times I'll think, okay, what do I need to do to make that? What is the first thing circling around in my mind?
One other thing that I think is very important, and it has to do with the nighttime sins that I've committed during the day 1,000 years ago or whatever. And that is when I write every morning, I'll all of a sudden see I'm taking myself too seriously. And after my husband died, I would go to a restaurant, and the powers that be that sees you looks at me and says, "How party of one?" And one day I just had too much of that. And I snapped back with my alternate personality. Only me and my imaginary boyfriend, and he doesn't. And sometimes because I love writing, it's so precious to me, I have to just back up and get one of my alternate personalities, like Brandy, to say, what the hell is going on here? You just, calm down. It's not time for that to download into your pen and on the paper. Shut up.
Yes.
I have did you have a question?
It's about process, so we can wait.
Okay,
Please go ahead.
sorry. You had a question?
I'm just taking everything in
Okay, sorry.
and finding a cold
I'm just trying to find.
and quiet.
Oh.
Yeah, so what happens to me when I tell people that I write, people who are other writers, people who are also writers, the first question is, oh, what is your process? And I get the deer in the headlights look, and in my head I see a vision of toddlers running in a sunny field, barefoot and happy and distracted by leaves and twigs and bugs and what's next? And I'm like, I can't tell people that's my process.
I buy you.
Sounds pretty vivid to me.
And when I just kind of like, so I get this guilt, I think, that kind of comes over me, because when I hear other writers say process, I think, oh, this, this uniform, I get this time, and I do this writing, and I do it da-da-da-da, and it's like some kind of rigid, regular, disciplined process. And for me, it's chaos, and, and I feel like, maybe that's why I'm not published yet, and then the other voice is like, no, you're not published yet because you're not submitting enough, because you're spending all your time running around like a toddler in a field. Coming up with these beautiful things that you love, and they're shiny and they're special, and then you go to get another one. And I'm all about the writing, and not about the, discipline of sticking to, putting things out there, right? And so how do I, how do I stop engaging so much in the joy of writing and get to some of the discipline? And has anyone had that problem? Or maybe not. Maybe I'm just the crazy toddler in the room.
That's really what it feels like a lot of times. And when I think about my writing process, a lot of times it's like a, fight clawing, casting for time. And sometimes it does look very disciplined, because I have to start tracking where I'm sending a collection or sending individual poems, and I just let myself go into that space. I don't really enjoy it. It's not that magic time, but I know that it has to happen, and that's what I need right in that moment. But I would be the same way. Like, once I get on, I'm sure the CBS News is just going to come and interview us all about the process. We'll just be like, it's just a mess. That's what
I was thinking my process is coffee and desperation, so the toddlers is much better.
That's great.
Keep that title, Coffee and
Yeah.
I keep thinking about authors that I admire, and there's a full spectrum, isn't there? I listened to a podcast with Chuck Palahniuk the other day of Fight Club fame, who has a regular, very rigid workshop every Monday morning of authors and they're all big name authors, and they're all published, and that it all feels very academic. And then I say to myself after this podcast, oh shoot, why don't I have that? I'm never going to have any success as a writer if I don't have that. And then I think of Charles Bukowski, who his work was only published because somebody found a bunch of bar napkins and cigarette butts. Right? Right. So I really just think it's what works. I know it seems so generic, but I don't think it is. I think it's what works for you. And the toddler, the joy of the toddlers in the field is I'd buy your book too.
Well,
I'm sorry.
go for it.
I have a friend, he's been writing for probably 10 years. And he's retired and he just jumped right into it like, today I'm going to take up writing. So he started going to some classes. Now he has a little informal class that he goes to of a group of diehards, you know. And they all read each other's things. Well, then he started making, you know, if he got 3 or 4 chapters done, and he's real a stickler about getting it polished up before he sends it out, but he sends it out to his friends. So I get to read his stuff religiously, and it's wonderful. And it's funny because sometimes he'll send it with cookies, which I always think is like a big motivator, right?
Yeah.
All right, there's cookies and a story. All I need is some coffee. But I think one of the amazing things, I've watched him on this journey, and he's read some of my writing and been very encouraging. And so he was like, finally, he submitted a story to a contest. He lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he finally has submitted a story. But he polished that thing for 3 months, and it had been written for a couple years. So I think we all have our process, whatever that is, it works for us. It's all very individual. But I think at the same time, you know, when you spend time thinking about something, you love it, you nurture it, you coddle it in whatever way that is for us as individuals, but maybe it's never really done. Maybe you're never really happy with it. But at some point, you know, have a good friend that says, dude, quit obsessing, you know, and just do it. And I think that there's no wrong way, is what I hear.
If I may, I'm thinking again, the analogy with children. If you raise children, you've never done. You've never got them perfectly, but they grow up anyway. So maybe the same with poems and things to works to submit.
Yeah, they grow up in.
Well, thank you all for being on this panel. Thank you for sharing finding time to write. I invite you all to continue this conversation as we go back into the next room over, to possibly ask more questions, maybe even look at the work itself, Tina's work, Brandon's work, Rand's work, and see where that goes. So thank you all very much, and thank you.